I don't know if anyone will even believe a story like mine, but I'm going to tell it anyway, because sometimes a single real story can save someone from breaking at the exact same point where I once shattered. My name is Emily, and I never thought I'd reach a point in my life where I would openly talk about the dark places I once lived inside of. The girl I used to be wasn't strong. She wasn't confident. She wasn't brave. She was just a quiet girl who kept giving chance after chance to people who only drained her soul. I wasn't born cold. Life made me this way. It started slow, little disrespect here, small manipulation there. And then suddenly I woke up one morning realizing I wasn't living at all. I was only surviving. I remember I used to laugh so easily when I was young. I used to trust so naturally. I believed that goodness always wins, that loyalty returns loyalty, that if you loved someone deeply, they would love you back the same way. I was wrong. I was so painfully wrong. I got attached to someone who loved the power of being loved more than the responsibility of giving love back. I didn't see it at first. I thought the blaming, the silent treatment, the emotional withdrawals, the sudden distance, I thought all that meant something was wrong with me. So I tried harder. I changed myself again and again. If he complained I was too emotional, I pretended to be colder. If he complained I was too sensitive, I pretended to be numb. And slowly, without even realizing it, my identity became a shape made out of fear. Fear of losing him. Fear of not being enough. Fear of the silence he used like a punishment. But you know what hurts the most? Not the shouting. Not the nights I waited alone. Not even the lies. What hurts the most is the memory of how I used to see myself before all this. I used to be bright. I used to have dreams. I used to believe I had value. And then suddenly one person came into my life and convinced me, without ever needing to say the words, that I was worth nothing. He didn't need to hit me. He didn't need to scream. He only had to ignore me at the exact moments I needed love. He only had to walk away when I was vulnerable. He only had to act like my pain was annoying. That alone was enough to destroy me. I became addicted to the hope of breadcrumb love. I took every tiny validation like oxygen. One good morning text, one random compliment, one warm moment. And I stayed for that one moment, even though there were hundreds of moments that broke me. Trauma bonds are real. They make you choose pain over peace because pain becomes familiar, and familiar feels safer than the unknown. That's the psychological trap nobody talks about. Days turned into months, months into years, and in those years I lost myself completely. I stopped talking to friends. I stopped expressing my opinions. I convinced myself that silence was safer. I convinced myself that if I just stayed quiet, everything would be fine. But silence only protects the abuser. It doesn't protect the broken heart. It protects the person causing the damage, not the one receiving it. There were nights where I sat alone on the floor, my back against the cold wall, tears falling without sound, because I didn't want anyone to hear me crying. Pain is quieter when you've been hurting for too long. You don't scream anymore. You collapse quietly, like a building sinking into the ground. I remember the exact night everything changed. I was sitting in the car, waiting for him outside, and he was inside laughing with someone else. I wasn't invited inside. I wasn't part of his world. I was just the girl who waited, the girl who always waited, the girl who tolerated everything because she believed that someday he would suddenly value her sacrifice. That night, something inside me broke, but not the way it usually breaks. It didn't break into weakness. It broke into clarity. I suddenly understood that love should not feel like punishment. Love should not make you feel small. Love should not require you to shrink yourself. I drove home that night with shaky hands, tears blurring my view. And for the first time in years, I didn't try to fix anything. I didn't try to explain. I didn't try to justify. I didn't message him. I didn't apologize. I didn't beg. I simply left. That was the moment I walked away from everything that was killing me. But leaving doesn't mean pain stops. Healing is not romantic. Healing is messy. Healing is ugly. Healing is sitting in your apartment at 3 a.m. and realizing that the silence that used to feel like punishment is now the silence you have to learn to live with. Healing is not a straight line. It is reliving the trauma again and again until it loses power. It is learning to trust your own voice again. It is learning to eat properly again. It is learning to sleep without crying. For months I didn't know who I was. I felt empty, like I was walking around in a body with no identity. I couldn't even choose what to wear because I didn't know what version of myself was real anymore. That's what emotional abuse does. It rewires your sense of self. You lose your taste, your choices, your inner voice. You become a ghost in your own life. But the thing about hitting rock bottom is, there is nothing left to lose. And that is exactly where rebirth begins. I decided to start small, very small. I started by making a morning routine, not for productivity, not for success, only to have control over something again. I forced myself to go outside for at least 10 minutes every morning. Sometimes I walked around the block. Sometimes I just sat on a bench. But I let sunlight touch my face. I let wind move my hair. I spent time with the real world instead of the world inside my trauma. I began reading again. I began journaling. I wrote down everything I had been too afraid to say. I wrote letters to my past self. I wrote letters to my younger self. And eventually, I wrote letters to the girl who survived the darkest version of love. I didn't send them anywhere. I didn't show them to anyone. They were just for me. Writing became the therapy that saved me. Then one day something happened I didn't expect. I started having ideas again, ideas I used to have before I lost myself. I always loved storytelling. I always loved branding. I always loved the way words could change emotions. I always had a dream of building a media company. But I had buried that dream long ago inside a grave made of heartbreak. Slowly, I started small freelance work. I offered social media help to small local businesses, creating posts, writing captions, analyzing engagement. I wasn't very confident, but every time a client appreciated my work, I felt a piece of myself coming back. I learned things alone: algorithms, conversions, psychology of attention, marketing psychology. Everything fascinated me. It felt like finally my brain was being used for something meaningful, instead of trying to decode unpredictable emotions from a toxic partner. It was the first time in years where I felt some control. Again, I had no office, no team, no investment. I worked on a cheap laptop, sitting on my living room floor with coffee as my only companion. Sometimes my hand shook because I didn't believe I was capable. Trauma doesn't disappear just because you leave the relationship. Trauma tries to follow you into your career, into your dreams, into your new life. But I kept going anyway. One client turned into two. Two turned into 5. Word of mouth started naturally. People liked my results. They liked my clarity. They liked my storytelling approach. Because I didn't just do marketing. I used real emotional experience to understand human attention. My pain became my power. Within a year, I had enough clients to register my own agency. I remember the day I bought the domain for my website. My hand was literally trembling. The girl who once questioned her worth was now putting her name on a business. The girl who once begged someone to choose her was now choosing herself. I hired one assistant. Then later I hired 2 more people. Small team, but strong. The first time I saw my agency's revenue hit a number I used to only dream about, I cried silently. Not because of money, but because of how far I had come from the days where I used to cry alone in a car while waiting for someone who didn't see my value. Now, when I look at my life, when I sit in my office and watch my team working with brands, something inside me feels both proud and sad. Proud that I didn't give up. Sad that I wasted so much time on someone who never deserved even a minute of my loyalty. Sometimes people ask me, "Do you hate him now?" And my answer is no. I don't hate him, because if he had loved me, I would never have discovered the strength I have today. If he had treated me right, I would still be small. I would still be dependent. I would still believe that my value comes from being chosen by someone else. Now I know. I choose myself. Today I live in the USA. I run a marketing agency. I travel. I speak. I help other women build real brands out of broken confidence. And sometimes late at night, I look at the city lights and remember the girl I used to be. The one who cried quietly, so her pain wouldn't disturb anyone. I wish I could hug her. I wish I could tell her, "You are not weak. You were just loyal to the wrong person. You are not unlovable. You just loved someone who didn't know how to love." But that girl still lives inside me, and she reminds me every day to never settle again. So if someone out there is listening to this, and they are in the same place I once was, I want to tell you something I learned the hard way. When someone breaks you, don't let that be the end of your story. Let it be the beginning of your transformation. Your heartbreak is not your identity. It is the fire that burns away the past version of you, so the real you can rise. And trust me, the real you is powerful. Today, I'm thankful for the pain, because the pain became the reason I built a life I am proud of. The pain became the fuel that built my agency. The pain became the lesson that turned into purpose. I'm not the broken girl anymore. My name is Emily, and this is my story.